Okay, we're now at 3 minutes past 10, so I think we'll make a start. Welcome everyone to today's Local Authority Research Practitioner webinar and workshop. Thank you for joining us. This is a standard Teams call, so if I can ask that everyone puts themselves on mute, and it will be recorded and made available after the session. So if you'd like to turn your cameras off at this point, please do. My name's Laura Rennick and I'm Public Health Senior Research Manager at the NIHR Research Support Service Specialist Centre for Public Health at Newcastle University and Partners. And I'm joined by my colleague Mark Emerson, who's our Centre Programme Lead for our Local Authority Research Support and Services, including the LARP network. So today's webinar is going to be split into two parts. The first part is going to give some background on the Specialist Centre and our wider work, and then move on to the details of the latest LARP call, which is open now until the 15th of January. I'm also very happy to say we'll be joined by Anna Christie, who's a Public Health Knowledge and Intelligence Lead for South Tyneside Council, who's going to share some of her reflections on their own LARP recruitment journey. And we're going to finish the webinar with some questions and answers. At this point, we will have a brief pause before moving on to an optional workshop, and this has been developed following feedback from local authorities that have been successful in securing LARP funding in previous rounds. And the workshop will navigate through the application form itself, looking at some of the questions that require some more detail and sharing some top tips to maximise your application. And there'll be a further opportunity at the end of the workshop to ask some specific questions relating to the application process. So, just as way of introduction, the Specialist Centre for Public Health is a national centre and it's part of major investment by NIHR to support public health research outside of the NHS. Funding started on the 1st of October 2023 for 5 years, and it's shared between ourselves at Newcastle and we also have colleagues at Southampton University. Our funding's based on the knowledge that there's a well-established system for NHS research, but as many of you will be aware, this system isn't fit for purpose outside of the NHS. We know that more research is needed to provide evidence to inform decisions relating to population health, and our aim is to support this to strengthen research culture within local government and the communities they serve, and to improve public health and reduce health inequalities. Next slide, please, Mark. So our work at the Specialist Centre based at Newcastle University and Partners centres around 4 pillars. We have the local authority support and resources, and we've got a number of direct funding opportunities available to local authorities across England for research support and roles and for personal development awards. And together these investments aim to inform our centre's work, connect with the support on offer, build research capacity and capability, and enable a research culture of evidence-based decision-making. And the LARP funding call falls under this pillar of our work. Our pre-award research design advice includes a team of advisors and methodologists to provide researchers support and advice on research design in preparation for submitting both public health research funding applications and also NIHR Academy short placement and fellowship opportunities. So researchers can be at any stage of their career and level of research experience to access support, so please do get in touch with us. We will offer training and development opportunities to help build capacity and capability to undertake public health research and to use research evidence to inform decision making in local government. We are involving local authority colleagues in the shaping of our training plan, and some of you may well have been involved with this. And it's to make sure that our offer aligns with the need and is appropriate, impactful and accessible to colleagues at various stages in their research journey. And finally, we're scoping current and emerging systems for research ethics and governance for public health research, and we've identified some key themes that will inform our Year 2 projects in this space. And our ambition is to share learning and to develop guidance, templates, a repository of examples for best practice, but we're also undertaking some scope and work for the development of a public health research register. So on to LARPs. I'm very happy to report that we've already awarded funding for 34 LARPs in England, with around 12 already in post. The LARPs have been making headway in helping to facilitate a research culture and governance within their local authority and to help support research delivery. And the map that you can all see here identifies where we have current LARP funding in place and also where the gaps are that we seek to fill over the next course of our funding calls that will be happening now and maybe next year. I'm now going to hand over to Mac, and she's going to talk about the LARP call in more detail. So Mac, over to you.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, so I'm going to start out by telling you a little bit about the LARP role, and then I'll go into the details of the funding call itself. So what is the LARP role all about? Well, they are operational members of staff. They're not senior level strategy. They're on the ground supporting colleagues to harness the power of research. They're dedicated to facilitating research. So what they're generally not doing is leading on research projects themselves. The role is ambitious enough and they could get inundated with research requests. They're about facilitating research, and I'll explain a bit more about that in a moment. The role is really varied depending on the needs of your council. So if you're successful in gaining the LARP funding, you would develop the job description and personal specification based on the needs of your council and what you want that LARP to achieve. Some of the things, or most LARPs do in various different ways, is their infrastructure building. They're identifying ways to develop research capacity and capability within the council. So I want to give you some examples of what they've been doing. Some of our current LARPs have been working on. So they've established or built upon existing relationships with local universities, both formally and informally. They've been identifying or developing working groups of research champions across their council. So that's identifying people who are already interested in or working on or passionate about research and bringing them together to help spread the message and connect up what's happening. They've been learning about sharing and supporting research funding applications in-house. They've been participating in or even developing their own regional networks of research professionals. They've been doing scoping to identify training needs across the council and even creating, delivering and developing training for colleagues to fulfil the gaps that they've identified. And all of these things are really contributing to raising the profile of research in their local authority and raising the understanding of what we mean by research across their council. And by doing that, they're shifting the culture towards evidence-led decision-making. They've done this in various ways through hosting events, creating journal clubs, forums, delivering surveys and communication campaigns. And as I say, it's really varied depending on where you're at and what you need. Many of the LARPs have been responsible for developing that governance framework, documents and policies that are needed to deliver quality research. And also really underpinning all stages of no matter where you're at, LARPs are involved in developing public engagement and co-production of research with the local community. So that's what they do. The potential benefits and the vision for all of this is that they're expanding the use of evidence-led decision-making. You as a council gain a greater understanding of the needs of your local community and residents. You gain insights into the cost effectiveness of interventions and services, and they provide and identify opportunities for investment and funding. So maybe saving money, generating funding income, having an impact, identifying solutions, raising quality, and possibly even retaining staff, because it's a real professional development area for people in councils if they want to learn more about research. One of the final things I wanted to mention is that in the past, relationships with universities have often been that academic colleagues have approached councils. This is what we hear all the time, asking the local council, we want to develop research on this area and we want to use your residents to do that. We're trying to completely shift that dynamic so that local councils have their research priorities and they're approaching their partnerships with universities saying, we need your help to develop and conduct this research for us because this is our needs, this is what we want to know about. So hopefully that's a bit of an overview of what the LARP role consists of and what our current LARPs have been undertaking. Here at the Specialist Centre for Public Health, we ask local authorities to define themselves as one of 3 stages of research readiness. And we work with local authorities at all stages, so it doesn't impact your LARP funding application if you decide to apply. We just find it a really good conversational tool to see where you would define yourself as being. But we know it's subjective. We could ask 2 different people in the same council and we might get 2 different answers. So it's okay and it's nothing major to worry about. As I say, it's just a beneficial tool for you to work out your needs and for us to work out whereabouts you are and link you up with fellow councils that are at a similar stage. So the launch stage of research readiness is you're really early at starting out. You maybe haven't got much in-house research taking place, maybe don't have the staff to do that, or you haven't been able to identify what's taking place across the council. Research is still a pretty scary word for most people. You haven't applied for external research funding, and you're not yet established in any kind of governance and frameworks. Really early stages. Often we find that local councils cross between launch and build and are heading into that build stage where maybe they have started to apply for funding, research funding. They've started to establish relationships and networks. They have more in-house capability, but maybe they are still co-commissioning research to take place with academic partners and they're maybe not leading on that as much themselves. And the enhanced stage is you're a bit further along in that journey. You haven't got everything perfect because that's going to take a long time and we're still all early in this journey, but they maybe have established a bit more public engagement work, a lot more infrastructure and governance has been established, more formal relationships with universities, and a lot more in-house capability and in-house leading on research projects. So they're the 3 stages. I'm going to ask one of my colleagues to pop into the chat now. We have a web page that spells out a bit more detail about the launch, build and enhance, and we have suggested responsibilities, not objectives, but responsibilities relating to, for LARPs, the launch, build and enhance stage. So if you had a LARP, what responsibilities would they be taking on depending on where you're at? If you were to stay on for the workshop because you're planning and applying for the LARP funding, I'm going to discuss all of this further, and I'm also going to share a link to some job descriptions from local authorities who've already been successful and have been recruiting their LARP, and that way you can really see the variation in the requirements and the variation depending on what stage of research readiness your council is at. Okay, so now on to the details. What are we actually offering from the Specialist Centre? What are the details of this funding call? We're offering up to £50,000 of funding to recruit a LARP, and that's for a maximum of 24 months. If you were to apply for 12 months worth of funding, that would be prorated to £25,000. And that 50,000 or less is a contribution towards the salary of your LARP, usually around 50%. So we are asking local authorities to match fund for these roles. Now bear with me because I'm going to come back to this and it's always a frequently asked question about the match funding and I will elaborate. The LARP must start and the funding must commence for the LARP between the 1st of April next year and the 30th of September. And the most important thing I wanted to highlight at this point is that the LARPs that are being recruited and funded partly by us now are forming part of a huge LARP network. So there have been LARP posts in the past funded by clinical research networks, quite isolated around the country. And we've spoken to those LARPs and heard what it was like for them in the beginning. And we want to make sure that the first 6 months of each LARP's life is not spent a bit lost wondering where to start because it's a really ambitious post. We're using the network to try and help all our LARPs start on the best possible footing, learn from one another, share best practice, talk about the challenges together, come up with solutions. So it's a real opportunity now to have a LARP because they're going to be part of this supported, facilitated network where we're trying to create a positive vibe and a sense of belonging. Now, one of the most common questions we get is about the match funding, so allow me to address that now. If you are exploring match funding opportunities and you want to chat to me about how other local authorities have leveraged the funding to be able to do this, because we know 34 local authorities have managed this so far, just reach out to us after today. We'd love to chat to you about it and we can share how they've been able to do that. And I will explain in the workshop later how to address the questions on the application form specifically about match funding. If you feel after extensive exploration that you really can't match fund, please talk to us. Don't just submit an application and hope for the best. I would not want anyone to invest their time in an application that's going to be unsuccessful. It's a core eligibility criteria that you are able to match fund. What we have said is that if a local authority presents to us and chats to us before submitting their application, and they're able to demonstrate unique and exceptional circumstances as to why they can't match fund, then we'll have a conversation about it. But I want there to be full disclosure here. Of the conversations we've had so far, there hasn't really been anything truly unique or exceptional that we wouldn't be able to say, well, that also impacts several other local authorities in the same way. It's really challenging. We have to be fair here. What I would say if this really isn't the right time for you, we're very likely to have another call next July. We'd love to hear from you then, and that gives you more time to explore that match funding. But even if you can't apply for a LARP, we really want to work with you regardless. Please join our mailing list. Please keep in touch with us. We can include you in various networks and events and opportunities that we're undertaking, so you can learn from what we're undertaking, what we're learning from the LARPs. But yeah, if you have concerns about the match funding, please do talk to us. There are 3 frequently asked questions, actually, I'm going to go through the eligibility first, and then I'll talk to you about frequently asked questions. So just to cover all of the eligibility, the LARP role must be hosted and employed by a local authority. They can't be hosted by an ICB, NHS trust or university. The funding must be going to a local authority in England. HDRCs are not eligible to apply for this funding. The LARPs are actually filling the gaps where there isn't HDRC funding available. The application must be thoroughly completed and all required questions answered. That seems straightforward, and we're offering support to do that in one-to-one chats and through the workshop today. As I've mentioned, the funding must start between the 1st of April and the 30th of September next year. We're saying that the application must be broadly public health based. What I mean by that is if you were to apply and say the LARP's going to be based in the adult social care team and they're solely going to focus on social care research, we would get back to you and say this actually isn't a valid application for what we're doing. We understand that social care it falls under that larger umbrella of public health, and we're looking for that broader spectrum within what you're applying for. If there is no possibility that you can match fund, we ask that you talk to us before you submit, and you would only submit if we feel that your circumstances are exceptional. And on the application form, we ask that you include detail of how you'll be looking to explore continuing the post once our funding ends, and we'll be talking about that more if you stay on for the workshop as well. So these 3 frequently asked questions I mentioned that relate to match funding. Can you apply for the funding for a LARP for an existing post that already is currently housed in your council? The answer is yes, you can. If you have a member of staff who's already working on similar objectives to that of a LARP, or that their role may be able to shift towards this, we would definitely be interested in you applying for the LARP funding and talking us through. In question 14 on the application form, we specifically ask you for details of what their current role has consisted of, why they're now appropriate to become a LARP, and how you would be approaching this. If you're only looking for 3 days a week of their role to be a LARP and 2 days to stay in existing posts, you just need to explain to us how their time would be protected for the LARP objectives. The second question is, could you apply with a neighbouring local authority? I think someone's just asked this question that's come up on the slide. How perfectly timed was that? So yes, you can apply between 2 local authorities, neighbouring local authorities. If you're looking to find the match funding between the 2 of you, that may be a better option. What we'd ask is that throughout the application, you explain to us clearly what the hosting arrangements are going to be. Where's the LARP going to sit? Who's going to be their manager? How are they going to be supervised across both sites? How are they going to be supported to make that role work? And importantly, how will you be looking to continue the post once our funding ends if they're straddled across 2 local authorities? Talk to us before submitting your application if you're looking to do a joint application, and we can make sure that it tells us everything that the panel needs to know. But yes, that is a possibility. And the final question we get asked a lot is, could the LARP post be part-time? The answer to that is it can be 0.6 or above. So really 2.5 days a week or less, we just don't feel is enough time for the ambition that we have behind this role. So we're asking people to really only submit an application if it's 0.6 of a full-time equivalent or above, up to full-time. So hopefully those 3 alone are ways that you could consider being creative and playful. We know it's required in order to find that necessary match funding. They're our most common questions. So just a little heads up about the timeline. So the call is now open for applications. It closes at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 15th of January. We've deliberately tried to give you as much time as possible, and it's not an immediate closing date straight after Christmas. The panel will meet a couple of weeks later in the first week of February. And what we're really hoping to do is provide you with an outcome by mid to late February at the latest. We were able to achieve this in the July call. We're hoping to do it again. Bear with us and be patient if there are hold-ups, but we do appreciate the earlier you get that outcome. If you're successful, it gives you more time to recruit your LARP before the 30th of September. So you would have up to 7 months to then recruit that LARP and do all of the necessary stages to get them in post. So that's the timeline. If you're not able to stay for the workshop, I've got 2 top tips for filling in the application form. We really appreciate the time that you invest in that application, and I definitely appreciate when you read questions on application form, it can really feel a bit dry and a bit abstract and sometimes a bit, what are they actually looking for from me here? So I hope these 2 top tips are helpful. When developing your answers to the application questions, I'd like you to pretend that you've already received the LARP funding. And actually, the application form is a preparation document that you're going to hand to your LARP on their first day. They're going to want to know what's expected of them, what the wider ambition is of the council and the team and where they fit, what training has been identified as beneficial for them, who they're going to be connected up with. We want that level of detail. We want to know specifically what you want your LARP to do. Vague applications the panel struggle with. So that level of detail and telling us a story about where you're at as a council and that same story you would tell their LARP on their first day, that's the kind of detail that we want to hear from you. So hopefully that's a helpful top tip. The second is that I'd like you to think about the skills and experience you'll be looking for on your LARP person specification if you were to go out and recruit your LARP. So what I mean by this is it essential or desirable that they're from a public health background? For your needs as a council, is it essential or desirable that they're from a local authority background? Or are you really looking for someone with extensive research experience? The reason I ask you that is because that will dictate the salary scale, how much of the funding you're asking us from, the maximum up to 50,000, whether you want that post to be part-time, what their objectives are going to be, how they're going to contribute, and what training they might need. By identifying what you want to be in the person specification, it kind of, all the questions roll out from there. So in conversations I've already been having with local authorities, we've ended up talking about the person spec quite a lot, and that's ended up being quite helpful for them answering their questions. So I just say, tell us a story, give us lots of detail and make sure that your application is robust and thorough. And if you are definitely planning on applying, I would recommend staying on for the workshop after this. That's all I have for now. Laura, is there any questions in the chat you'd like me to address?
Well, I think one of your slides nicely addressed it, Mark. So the only question we've got from Des about the joint application. So I think you've answered that both within the slides and in your script. So yeah, that's it for now. If you want to move on to Anna.
Lovely stuff. Thanks, Des. What a perfectly timed question that was. Right, let's see. Okay, bear with me as I stop sharing. Okay, I'm now going to introduce and hand over to Anna Christie, who works at South Tyneside Council and was successful in gaining funding for a LARP back in our July call. And their LARP has just started 2 weeks ago, I believe. Anna, over to you. Are you there?
Hi, yes. She just started last week, so very fresh. She came down to the LARP network meeting before she actually started, so very much thrown in the deep end, but very exciting to have her. I'm going to attempt to share some slides, if you can bear with me. Share, that would be, you think I'd be used to this by now, really. Is that PowerPoint mode?
Yep, we could see you, Anna.
Brilliant. So, chatting with Alex, who works at the centre, she asked me to kind of touch on a few things. So, just to remind myself of what I'm going to talk to you about is the NIHR funding, the kind of our journey for now, because we've been quite successful in various different pots to support our kind of research development. I'll give you a flavour of some of the research that has led to kind of impacted on our work, and then I'll reflect on how we applied for the LARP funding. And Alex suggested top tips, but I'm happy to answer questions around that. So I suppose, well, I joined the council here in 2018, and I think our first kind of success was around the NIHR's local authority call, which kind of was the precursor to a lot of the HDRCs, but that really helped us understand kind of where we were as a council at that point around our research capability and capacity, really. So it kind of identified there's a lot of interest in our local authority, but a lot of work to be done. We were fortunately coupled with a few years later, we did a LGA, a local government peer review as well, that also identified the kind of our capacity around the data and evidence-led decision making could be strengthened. So for us, and I think this is maybe one of the successes in the application form, we were kind of really able to embed the LARP into a kind of wider programme that's been established. So we have a transformation board across the local authority with 4 key strands, which is what's depicted there, of which evidence and engagement is one element. So we've got a cross council working group that our LARP, Liz, who will be able to be supported by. But just to couple with that, we were also supported by the Clinical Research Network as well, that supported my Director of Public Health time as well as mine, and we've got a Research Operations Officer to support that. So there's been quite a lot of kind of build up to our LARP call. So when we applied for the LARP funding, I've kind of put us in that middle section, which I've already forgotten the terminology, but not the beginning, not the end, but in that development stage, because we still don't have that research infrastructure kind of really established, but we've definitely got the kind of bones that's kind of helping us work towards that. Other bits of work we've been successful with, and something that you may want the LARP to consider, we had some what was the NIHR's Clinical Research Network kind of non-contingency funding, which we used to do some community insights work that led to the refresh of our health and wellbeing strategy, and still referred to, that really got to target some of our more deprived and seldom heard population groups to understand their health and wellbeing needs. So that was really valuable, and really still resonates. And part of that was developing kind of research capacity as well. So we held an event with staff across the council as well as partners to kind of get them thinking about potential questions and how to generate research questions. So that's something that, again, that will be able to pick up. The top left represents some of the Spark Awards. So these are the short placement awards that both local authority staff can apply for, but also academics from the NIHR Academy can come in and do some research in practice. So we're accessible with a couple of members of staff as well as an Academy member to do some research. The Academy member did an evaluation of our welcoming spaces in South Tyneside, and our members of staff, we had a policy officer who looked at some anti-poverty strategies, and a senior psychologist, educational psychologist, who went on to do some shadow on an NIHR funded clinical, not a clinical trial, but a research program to kind of bolster her research skills. So again, these are the kind of opportunities that we really want to connect our kind of staff to kind of pique their interest, but also do work that kind of will lead to inform our decision making. The bottom right represents an output from a study that's coming to a close now, but was the first. This is another acronym that you might want to get familiar with, which is the Public Health Interventions Responsive Study Teams. So this a team. The application form for that is also relatively straightforward and NIHR standards. And a team came in to evaluate our Social Navigators project. This is in the kind of welfare team that in our housing services offer, that try to do a kind of take a different approach with people facing financial crisis. And they evaluated that through mixed methods. So we're just at the stage now that we're mobilising the knowledge from that piece of work, that also is informing a lot of different pieces of work in the borough about doing that kind of outreach, more peer support led pieces of work. So there's some really valuable findings from there that we'll continue to build on. Just another couple of elements that we've got going on that the LARP is going to lean into here. We recently run during the summer before Liz started, a kind of internal survey around our kind of decision-making capability. So we ran that an internal staff survey, and we've got quite a good response rate from that, and that'll inform the work programme. One of the items that I'm keen to get our LARP involved in is around the developing knowledge skills, and should be using the findings from this survey to inform the kind of priorities needed for that, both working with the centre. So we're not going to duplicate, because I know the centre's got a training manager now, so just working together to maximise that capacity. And we're launching soon our data observatory, which is going to act as our repository for a lot of the evidence and research outputs that we've generated to kind of support that knowledge mobilisation. So moving on, so just to highlight that with kind of thinking of the applicants that we've got for our LARP role, the kind of most successful ones found our annual research report, which was published in September, that really kind of gave the kind of a real good synopsis of where we're at in terms of our research journey, and it's able to kind of and has a bit of a plan on a page of where we would like to get to. So that was a kind of really valuable element. So if you can kind of give your LARPs kind of a kind of background to where you are, either in your kind of application form or somewhere, that I think that would be valuable to do. Oh, that hasn't come up. So so now on to kind of tips around the LARP application. We pitched our LARP as at the same level of our public health practitioner in the public health team. So while they're hosted in the public health team, we made it clear that they'll be working across the council, recognising the kind of wider determinants of health that we would like to influence, and recognising that we want somebody who's well, be very much supported, but can kind of lead their own programme of work as well. Now, yeah, and I suppose kind of leaning into the any networks that you have established, or recognising if you haven't got those in the kind of wider system with academia, you might want to consider how you will do that, and as well as the kind of training needs. So I think, Mac, I'm not sure if you put one of our example of our job description as one of the examples that's been successful, so you might want to consider that. We did have a really good range of candidates from a wide background. So again, kind of considering what you want most about that candidate, but I was kind of really impressed by the level of excitement and interest from candidates coming in, and it really resonated in the application. So it's a really exciting time, and like I said, this has just started last week, so still getting embedded in the team, but there's a lot of opportunities that she's going to work on. So we're really excited. It's going to be really good. It's going to push our agenda forward. So we applied for HDRC funding, but we're unsuccessful. So this has given us the kind of some added capacity to kind of push forward with the plans that we still have. But I'm happy to answer questions if it hasn't kind of touched on what people need to hear.
Thanks, Anna. Does anybody have any questions for Anna about their journey in terms of LARPs and applications, and what the top tips are? Because I think it came up with some really good ones. I like the report that was in there. I think that's a great starting point for any LARP wanting to apply for posts. So I'll give people just a minute. If you'd like to raise your hands or pop a question in the chat, we can get Anna to answer them before we move on. Okay. Grace,
Hi, yeah. I just wanted to ask, Laura, you mentioned that report that Anna kind of showed, and I think I incorrectly thought that report might have been what the LARP had done. And obviously, I recognise you said they would have just come into post. So I guess we're not really in a position to be writing a report like that because we were at our launch. What am I going to put in it? A tumbleweed, like in fairness, there's not going to be enough to put in that report. So I guess in light of we don't have one of those, does that put us at a disadvantage? Or should I be trying to put some kind of plan on a page of what we would do? Do you know what I mean? Because I looked at that and I thought, well, that for me is a great example of what the LARP could perhaps produce as part of their role and kind of help us assess that kind of where we are and about what they might have achieved over the 2 years. But I wouldn't have that now to include. I could just talk about our ambitions and the kind of small amounts of work that we're doing at the moment.
I mean, that's fair enough, Grace. I suppose it's depending where you are in your research journey and that kind of that schema. Yeah. So because we're in that middle ground, that I had the content to put into that, but I suppose it's just recognising it would be helpful for candidates to know the context that they'll be working with, how if you are in your infancy, kind of being upfront with that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And that might reflect on the type of candidate that you need as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Paul.
Hi there. Thanks very much for the talk. Really interesting and really helpful. Can I just ask a little bit about the less of the LARP role and more of your role around it and the kind of in-kind support and what kind of capacity you think that would need ongoing? How much, can you ask of the LARP role, and how much do you need to build in and commit to as a team for this kind of work?
Yeah. I think I'll pass over to Mac as our LARP network lead. Mac will be able to give a little bit of information about what the centre provides in terms of network and those LARPs together and what's on offer from the centre for them. But then also a little bit more detail around what local authorities have provided from their side in terms of support for their LARP. So Mac, can I hand over to you?
Can indeed. Great question, Paul. So the centre, my role is solely to support the funding calls for the LARPs and the LARP network. We have a programme of events. So we met in person with as many of the LARPs and line managers as we could in London a couple of weeks ago and provided travel funding so that people could attend. We launched that network. We ran an elevator pitch workshop. We heard from current LARPs. We shared best practice. This afternoon, we have virtual drop-in session for the LARPs to come in and chat informally with one another. We're trying to create a safe space where people can say, I'm really struggling with this. And we're avoiding at the moment regional meetings with agendas that need to be facilitated online. We're deliberately going for something that's much more informal and easy for people to learn, easy for people to chat. We're sharing all the LARP contact details in a directory. They're getting invited to show and tell events as of the new year. So once a month, someone externally or one of the LARPs themselves will be sharing best practice. Resources are being shared on a special intranet page. There's lots of things that we're trying to do as a centre to develop training in templates, in governance and ethics, and in public engagement and enhancement. And we'll be running sessions on all of that. So it's a really strong, this isn't a tick box exercise. That's what someone said to me. It's really interesting what the Specialist Centre is doing. It's clear that you're not just ticking a box. We're really trying to support these roles. So hopefully that is evident in what I've just described. What we ask in the application form and what we ask from the local authority is, when we talk about in-kind, at the very bottom of the application form, it's really just talking about computer space within the local authority office space, what team they'll sit in, because previously in the application form, we've already asked you what training would be provided to them, who would be their manager, who would they be supervised by, what professional development opportunities are there, would you maybe assign them to a mentor? There is obviously some capacity required for management and supervision of this role, but we feel like because of how much we can get out of that time that the local authority invests in this person is worthwhile. And we're trying to do everything we can to make that capacity issue for yourselves as limited as possible. So, for example, we're sharing those job descriptions so that you're not starting from scratch. And if you do want to know what have other LARPs been getting up to, we share lots of resources. We've got a kind of starting out as a LARP suggestions and ideas booklet that line managers can be involved in. We've been asked for line manager regional meetings so that you can chat and learn from one another. How can we best support our LARP in the most efficient way so that it's not using up too much of your capacity? And we love to hear suggestions. So it's quite, I'm just going to keep saying it's a really supportive environment for both the LARP and the line managers, because we really do appreciate the capacity that's required, but it shouldn't be too onerous. It's bringing in someone to benefit your team. Is that clear?
Yeah,
Paul?
no, that's
Anything
great.
I've
That's
missed?
really helpful. Thanks. Yeah.
Fabulous. And there's a question from Owen. Hi, Owen. That's so good you've been able to join us. For Anna, I know you have a few HDRCs not too far from you. Yeah, we are lucky in the Northeast. Is your intention that the LARP will link in with these HDRCs? What a phenomenal question. Over to you, Anna.
Yes, I haven't quite got onto that, but certainly, I mean, it relates back to Paul's question as well, really. If you can connect your LARP to as many kind of networks as possible. So I know Liz got a lot of ideas from the LARP network that she attended last week, 2 weeks ago, and it certainly I'll be facilitating those connections as part of, because I'm her line manager. And I think just going back to Paul's question, with any new member staff, it'll take more time in the beginning to then get them up and running. And yes, if you can look at others, I definitely draw on support from our HDRCs in terms of drawing up our job descriptions and kind of what level that they need to be at. So they've been really helpful support there. So really drawing your networks, drawing your kind of peer support to kind of help whoever the candidate is that comes in, and lean into the things that, given the timing and depending on how long term you think the role will be in, you need to really kind of run with the things that you want the most. And I believe that that will kind of start to kind of instill the culture. So if you're starting at the beginning, what are the kind of basics you need to get started first, and then build on from that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. And just to also add to that, Owen, we've been asked about this a lot, and I have a checklist for when LARP first starts. So when Liz started a couple of weeks ago, I send her a welcome email, I send her some resources, I send her a link to get added to the LARP directory. And what I've now started doing is introductions immediately to any contacts we already have in the regional HDRCs close to those LARPs, because we've been specifically asked, can you help us link people up? So we are kind of helping immediately. Now, what that will then look like and the shape that takes, whether LARPs will be invited to regional HDRC meetings or whether it'll take shape in brand new meetings, that still remains to be seen. And we are giving a bit of breathing space to HDRCs, because actually they're in this mammoth structural recruitment stage and don't have a great deal to share with LARPs just yet. And actually, in many ways, the LARPs are a bit more flexible and can make progress faster. So it might be that we have more to share with them than they have to share with us for a little while. But we are in that checklist immediately trying to hit that now and say, we know of some contacts that are really keen to work with the LARPs in your area. Here's an introduction to those people. And obviously, if you have those links, you can do the same.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, we've got another question from Marsha.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Anna, for doing that presentation. I think it was really helpful to see what the experience has been like. And I don't know if this is a question for you or potentially Mac, but in terms of the identifying training needs, how specific at the application stage should that be?
I can take that if you want, Anna.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that was some of the feedback that I wasn't specific enough, really. So yeah.
It's a really tough question, Marsha, and we will talk about it in the workshop. The reason I mentioned about have a think about what skills and experience you would want on the person spec, if you know, actually, it'd be a really broad spectrum if we said they have to be public health, have worked in a local authority and have research experience. That's asking a lot. So if you know you definitely want research experience, but it's only desirable that they've worked in public health or a local authority before, then you would say in your application form, we've identified training to get them settled into the local authority. We'll set them up with a mentor. We'll do whatever this induction process is. You spell out to us what that would look like, and identify public health training that they may need to take because you're only asking for that as a desirable criteria. Some local authorities have said, actually, we don't need any research experience. What we want is someone from a comms background who's really good at presentations, advocating, negotiation. And so they know nothing about research. So they can say, well, we've already identified what this LARP's going to be good at and what we're going to want from the job description and the person spec. But because they're not going to be from a research background, we've identified NIHR Learn, our local HDRC, our local university run these training sessions about research. So these might be beneficial to them. Of course, it depends on the candidate that you end up getting, but we just need in the application form to see that you've explored what would be out there, and it wouldn't just be up to them to work it out once they start. And it should be relatively straightforward to identify some opportunities because you've had a think about what would be on that person spec. Does that make sense, Marcia? You're nodding. I think we're good. Fabulous. And
Yes,
Anne Bowers asked us, do the existing LARPs find the universities are receptive to them? That is such a great question. Anna, do you have any insight on that one? I have some stuff I can say, but I'll go over to you first.
Tricky because I mean, I have just because I've been in research I've been in practice for since I did my PhD. I have links to universities, and Fuse in the Northeast is really good at kind of engaging with local authorities. So I've introduced them to kind of academics that I have constant contact with. I think it might be dependent on relationships, existing universities, but I would probably lean into the fact that universities want to do impactful research, and really to do that, they need to work with people who practice and implement research findings. So I think kind of emphasising that importance would be really helpful. And I think from my experience, most are receptive, particularly in the public health sphere. I can't speak wider, but I'm starting to build those kind of relationships with certain kind of beyond the kind of public health sphere in terms of the wider determinants of health. But generally, I would say it's positive.
Lovely comment from Gary there. I knew that's what you were going to say, Gary. I would just say, and backing up what Anna said there, is we've had lots of conversations about this, and it tends to be, what's the incentive for the universities? What are we? Let's not make a transactional relationship. It's kind of formal and informal partnerships with universities can look different, but they need to know what they're going to get out of it and what you're aiming to do, and setting your boundaries and saying what you want from the beginning, because otherwise they can come in with a lot of academic know-how and don't really understand how local authorities work. And that power dynamic and that relationship building takes different shapes and takes some time. What I would say is that the relationships really do differ depending on what stage you're at and the universities themselves. And what we are doing and have been asked to do is compile some kind of infographic or list of all the different ways that local authorities currently do partner with universities, whether that's setting up research proposals with master's students, having academic mentors. There's lots of different ways that they partner formally and informally, with data sharing agreements and memorandums of understanding and without those. So we're trying to compile that together, and in the early part of next year we'll hopefully be able to share that with you all and with the LARPs to help them decide what steps you want to take forward.
Yeah, I'll drop in the link in the research report. I kind of forget all the stuff that we do, so I have good connections with the kind of program. I forget the kind of title, but those who trying to find research projects for students on various kind of health related topics with a couple of our local universities. So I think that's kind of really valuable to kind of build up those relationships. But I think with a lot of this, it is those kind of relationship building. So if the LARP's coming in, you facilitating that, but maybe think about that in terms of your candidate as well, that they need to be able to kind of tenacious enough to kind of reach out, kind of build those bridges. Yeah.
Thanks, Anna. I think we've come to the end of the questions. The timing's running quite nicely, I think, but thanks, Anna, for that overview and for answering those questions and your reflections on your journey so far. That's been really helpful. And thanks to everybody else for listening. So the next part of the session is optional. It's a workshop on the LARP application form